Today, I'm so excited because we have with us for the Women's Retail Collective podcast, Audrey McLoghlin, the founder and CEO of Frank and Eileen and Grayson. Audrey, thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to talk to you.
So we kind of met, but not really. But I saw you on a panel back when we were at E-Tail in Palm Springs in February.
Yep.
But I want to have the audience hear a little bit of background. I got to hear about you at that panel, but tell us a little bit about, the early days of Audrey, where you grew up, and a little bit of your background, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, it was so interesting. I didn't get to see your face at the meeting, but you had the most interesting question of anyone from the audience. So I remember being like, who was that? Who did that?
That's right. It was outside and sunny. And
I'm a redhead, right? So that level of sun in my face, like, forget it. Like, I was like a blind mole. So I definitely couldn't see anybody. But So in terms of my background, my family's all from Ireland, which ultimately informed all of the branding and love story around starting Frank and Eileen. My mom in particular came from a big Irish family, very traditional back then. My dad actually came from a small family, but my dad was originally from Northern Ireland, and then I named it after his parents, which is Frank and Eileen. And they moved then from Northern Ireland to County Wicklow. And so that's like kind of how the whole Frank and Eileen story is framed. And then my mom was from County Monaghan. And back in the 70s, my parents got married and decided to uproot everything they knew and set off for this idea that they could build a better life in America for their future family. And when I think about it, it's just so unreal. Like, this is, obviously pre-internet, pre-email, pre-FaceTime, pre-texting. Like, you were just out on your own with really no way. And I have so many memories of my childhood, my mom sitting at the kitchen table for hours and hours and hours every night, writing letters to all of her brothers and sisters and her mom. And, it's such a different time. So I think so much of who I am now has been informed by like this crazy sacrifice that my mom in particular made. She's the driving force behind all of it. So they left Ireland and wanted to come to America, but you can't just show up. So They went to, at the time, a lot of Irish people were able to go to Canada. And so they went to Toronto, and I was born there in Toronto. And a year later, almost like Irish twins, my sister was born also in Toronto. And then a few years later, maybe like 3 years later, my dad got a job in New York City. And so that was this big opportunity for them to actually get to come and move to the US. So we moved to New Jersey and lived there for a few years. And as a kid, we moved around a lot, basically. My dad was an engineer, and anytime he got a better opportunity, they packed up all five of us and we moved to another city. So I changed schools a lot when I was young, and we had no family in the United States. So it was really just us our whole lives growing up. So.
And then what made you decide to, like, after high school, did you start working in retail right away, or like what kind of drew you to this?
Yeah, I mean, so much of it's interesting. It kind of happened accidental. I think I had two paths going on. My parents, my whole life when I was young, would kind of tell me about why they came to the US and what they wanted for their kids. And they would say, here, you can be anything you want. You can do anything in America. You can be anything you want, as long as you're a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer.
With those minor qualifiers.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, big choices. So I literally went through each of them. When I was really young, I wanted to be a doctor, and I would watch all these doctor programs and surgery programs and blood. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. And then as I got older, I thought, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I want to wear this really nice suits and go to court.
I love that suits are the qualifier. Like, skip the blood.
I'm into the outfit. Those blue doctor outfits is not really working for me. I want to really wear these little skirt suits. When I finally became 16 and could drive, and I was so excited, that's when I got my first job in retail. And I don't know what happened. I just loved it.
Where was it?
I worked at the Gap in like 1993.
Oh my God.
To me, Gap was like working at Barney's. I mean,
yes.
It was so nice. I was so excited, but I really, I had a unique perspective, but to me that was like designer. And but I really did love Gap as a brand back then. It was very different than I think what the whole world has changed to over the last 25 years or something. But I learned so much there. It's actually really interesting. It's just like I learned everything about product and fit and working with customers, and I just loved it. I just kind of got addicted and was trying to figure out, all right, well, how do I eventually pivot going to engineering school to like working in fashion in some way? And but from a business point of view, not really from design, so that was just kind of interesting. That, like, I think changed. I had an education path, but then I had this path of what I actually really enjoyed being around and doing, and learning how to bring out the best in people through what they choose to wear every day and how it makes them feel. And and that was really rewarding.
And
So
you would attribute that to your days at Gap still, you think?
yeah, it totally happened there.
Where
And
was this? What city are you in
this
this
was
time?
in the suburbs in Atlanta, right? So,
Okay.
I mean, this is like at Perimeter Mall in Atlanta 25 years ago, or 27 years ago. It was a really long time ago.
I think there's something really unique though about, like, I used to work at J. Crew too, and I feel like, especially as I was, kind of diving into the Frank and Eileen brand too, there are things that you learn, like you learned fundamentally when you started those jobs. Even as, like, I was a young person. That was one of my first early jobs too, where you're learning so much about, like you said, how to make people feel good in a piece of clothing, and just like minor details. Like we had to go to a course at J. Crew to learn about like the grosgrain ribbon detail on the inside of the shirt, and how that cord, like everything had a purpose almost.
Yeah, it's funny
Um,
that you bring up J. Crew, because after I worked at the Gap, I went to work at J. Crew. This was probably like late 1994, maybe. And I mean, such a different place. So, back then it was still family owned, famous for their catalog, right? I mean, people would
yeah.
just come in gripping it with their life and everything circled. J. Crew was really high end for me. I could definitely never pretend to afford J. Crew. And, but it was interesting. Back then they only had 8 stores. They had a very specific strategy where they were only in Neiman Marcus wings of malls, so right
Right.
next to Neiman Marcus, and they would hire all the Neiman Marcus very seasoned sales associates with big client books. And so back then, probably dates my age, but J. Crew ran everything with client books.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, a different world. So it was all about clienteling and bringing them in, and foot traffic was fine, but that wasn't really what they were built on back then. So it was pretty wild. So that was like a whole different learning experience. I feel like I learned one whole point of view from being at the Gap, and the product side, and you were just dealing with everyday people walking in and dressing them. And I really loved that. And then at J. Crew, just another side of like clienteling and business. And, that was really, so it was a very, very interesting learning experience at such a young age, right? I was like 16, 17 years old. And then I graduated high school when I was 17, and went to engineering school.
Let's fast forward to today. When you meet people, how do you introduce yourself? Like what's your elevator pitch these days? Because you have a lot going on.
That's actually really funny that you asked that question, because this day I don't know. Once I was with someone, I really embarrassed them, because we were in a group of very accomplished, very successful tech people, and someone said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "I make button-up shirts." And the person next to me was very embarrassed. I was like, "Well, I do, so I don't really know, I think I'm so far past, like, having, I don't know, having some fancy pitch. Like, I think it's like, that's really what I do, and make the most beautiful button-up shirts in the world. And, so I don't have a perfect way of saying it, but I think it maybe depends on the audience. Like, I think I identify with being an entrepreneur. And I think growing up, I always thought, like, I want to build something, I want to make something. And I think there's a core part of being an entrepreneur. It's like you can build or make anything. Like, all companies, have a lot in common of how to build them and how to run them. And then you can decide what your actual product is, right? So you could be, selling widgets, or you could be selling button-up shirts, but the fundamentals are all the same.
Well, and for those who are listening that might not know, you make 2 you have two core brands of button-up shirts that are very lovely. Tell us a little bit about the two brands, and one's been around for a while, one's somewhat newer.
Frank and Eileen, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year, so that's been an incredible journey. You know, my entire career I've been obsessed with a button-up shirt. So before I ever started Frank and Eileen and Grayson, I think I'm a serial entrepreneur now. I think it might be official. I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. And so I was quite young when I started my first company. But even before that, I always really was drawn to the button-up shirt. I think being a young, you know, even being an engineer, but being a young female founder, it's very hard to get people to take you seriously. And it's like, you got to get up and fight the fight every single day. And so for me, the button-up shirt was my armor. And so if I could just put that on every day, it just made me feel, it was like this magic security, and I could go out and fight the fight every day. So when I started Frank and Eileen, it was actually by accident. I had 4 multi-brand retail stores at the time, which were named for my mom. They were called Una.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit further, because that's not something to gloss over here. So tell us just a quick background on that, Audrey.
I think when I wanted to start my first company, you know, I was like, well, what do I want to do? And, you know, I think honestly, I was thinking back on how much I loved my time and experience at the Gap, right? And I loved being on the sales floor with the customer and teaching them about product and how to dress themselves and how to style themselves, and seeing the impact that had on people. So I decided my first foray into entrepreneurship would be to open a multi-brand retail store. So I opened the first store in Manhattan Beach, California, and that's like an amazing place to have a business. And then ultimately over time, I opened a second, third, and fourth store. Quickly realized, you know, how hard it is to be a multi-brand specialty store, you know, the margins, the competition with the department stores. So I wanted to start doing vertical products. So I started designing my own brand, and, you know, all this stuff on some level threads together. But, you know, I was trying to work with so many different manufacturers and learn and everything else. It was really hard to find someone to produce at the quality I wanted. And when I finally did find somebody, they basically wouldn't give me the time of day and gave me like really pretty much unreasonable terms. And I was like, this is non-negotiable. I look forward to doing business with you. We shook hands. 15 years later, we still work together. And, but, you know, they had these really, to me, like outrageous minimums, right? I just wanted to make product for my 4 stores, and that clearly wasn't an option. So that forced me to launch my first wholesale brand. So I launched my first wholesale brand so that I could sell to other retailers and meet the minimums, so that I could ultimately have this vertical product for my stores. And through that, over a very long time, I made some relationships with incredible retailers that have been in the business for 30, 40 years and really taught me a lot about that side of the business. And then ultimately, I was working on another project, like a tissue cashmere program that I was really excited about developing. And I was at a factory in LA, and they asked me to wait in this conference room, which seems to be a theme that people leave me in rooms for too long. So he left me in there for too long. So I started snooping around, and I was pulling all the books off the bookshelf and reading them. And all of a sudden I pulled out this dusty book of Italian menswear fabrics. When I opened it up, I just almost fainted. So by the time the guy came in, I like honestly had lost interest in what I was there for. And
no more tissue cashmere.
Totally. I was like, enough. Yeah, now can I borrow this book? And he says, oh, that book is old. It's irrelevant. I was like, great. So you don't mind if I borrow it then? So he let me borrow it. I went home, looked up the company name and called Italy. And to this day, I have no idea why they took my call. And they sent a gentleman out to see me at my factory, at my manufacturer's factory in Los Angeles. And 12 years later, we've been exclusive fabric partners all this time. And we've just had the most magical relationship. And that's basically how Frank and Eileen was born. Like, I just fell so in love with these fabrics, and I was like, wait a minute. I already am obsessed with the button up, right? But I've never in my life seen a button up made for women using these unbelievable menswear fabrics. Why in the world are these used for men and not for us? So basically the whole idea of Frank and Eileen, born, at very late nights at the factory, was I want to build a whole brand and story around reinventing the button-up shirt for women by using these beautiful Italian menswear fabrics that really women have never been exposed to. So I spent 6 months developing our signature silhouette, which is called the Berry, which is Frank and Eileen's son and my dad. So we launched with one silhouette with these gorgeous Italian poplins, and I developed this signature wash that we call our crinkle. And all of our Italian poplins have this crinkle wash, and so we take these wildly beautiful menswear fabrics, and then we mash them up and crinkle them, and your collar sticks out in every different way. And 10 years later, there's still the Berry and the crinkle, and our white crinkle actually has been our number one seller for 10 years. So it doesn't matter how fashion changes or how much newness we put out, it's still always the Berry, poplin, and white crinkle that's our number one seller. So it stands the test of time.
And you also have, you had your daughter, and
Yeah.
then you have another brand, Grayson.
Yeah.
And tell us about that and kind of the continuation of the Frank and Eileen
Yeah.
story.
So as you know, and all moms know,
Mm-hmm.
having a child turns your world upside down, and all of a sudden life as you knew it no longer exists. And, you just have a completely different perspective on everything. So it was interesting for me having my daughter, Grayson. You know, I think, like, I don't think I really ever thought I was going to become a mom. And so when I did, maybe it was more profound for me, like, whoa, it really does change the way you look at the world. And she was born in such an interesting time, I think, where girls are going to grow up with a different set of rules than we grew up with, and they're going to grow up with a different way of thinking than you and I grew up with. And I think it's such an exciting time, and there's all these young girls out there just like rewriting the rules and breaking down the barriers and unwilling to accept things the way that they were before. And I think I was so excited that my daughter's going to be part of that. And I just wanted to figure out a way as an entrepreneur, like, how can I be part of that conversation? How can I be part of that change for her and her generation? And so ultimately that came out in the form of launching a new brand called Grayson. And we really wanted to be able to, talk to that younger woman, whether younger in age or younger in the way that they think, in terms of just, changing the way we live, changing the decisions that we make, changing the rules. So yeah, so we launched Grayson, of course, around my obsession of the button-up shirt is, the foundation of everything that I do. So we also launched it through the lens of like one ridiculously perfect button-up shirt for that customer.
And it's fantastic. I have
Oh,
one,
it's so
and
good. I
I'm
mean, we make
on,
the most
and,
beautiful
and
shirt.
it's definitely, especially as a mom, it's a shirt that can withstand lots of washing and wearing.
Yeah, we did. We really did. When we were launching Grayson, instead of using a traditional fit model like you usually do in the fashion business, we decided, what, forget it. I want to use real women.
Yeah.
So we used 30 real women of all different ages, shapes, sizes, and we basically would bring them into the office, and we had this big chart. We would chart everything about them, from their height, their shoulders, their bust, their waist, their hips, their age, everything. And we ultimately designed this one silhouette around what we were discovering as a female form. And definitely at least over half of the women that we were working with were moms, so we really took that into account. There's like kind of specific challenges and needs that moms have, from simple things of being able to like reach up and lean over, or having new moms having like a soft midsection. And and with button-up shirts, you have to deal with shoulders, bust, waist, and hips. And so we really kind of took all of those factors and really just like engineered this perfect shirt from the ground up to fit all of these women. So so I definitely think it's a mom favorite.
Well, and one of the other things that I noticed, just as I was reading about you, Audrey, before this, is that you don't really describe these button-up shirts as just a shirt. Like the way that you talk about them, and even when you describe, your reason for creating the first Frank and Eileen shirt, that it was an armor of sort.
Mm-hmm.
You really kind of give these shirts their own personality. And I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about where that comes from, or what inspires that? Why do you do that?
Sure. I think originally it does stem from this idea that for me, getting up every day and being able to put on a button up shirt made me feel like strong for the day, and I could go out and accomplish anything, and I didn't have to feel self-conscious or anything. And I think when I think back my whole life as a woman, it's like, I think there's a lot to this moment in the morning of getting dressed. And I think how you start your morning, whether it's like, are we having a good hair day or a bad hair day? What I put on that day, do I feel great? Do I feel my best or do I feel my worst? And I think for me personally, but I think for millions of women, like sometimes we forget that moment of getting dressed in the morning can really set the tone for the whole day. Like how confident do I feel? How effortless do I feel? Because if I'm self-conscious about what I'm wearing or my hair, like it might distract me throughout the day, So I think by creating these incredible button-up shirts, like it's this feeling that you can start building them and collecting them, which our customers do all the time. You start with 1, you go to 2, 3, the next thing you have 10, and you can just reach into your closet every day and know that when you put this on, you're going to feel your best that day. And that's an incredible gift to be able to have. And I think between technology and our becoming a mom, like our lives are so fast paced now. It's so intense. Like gone are the days where you have time to change outfits 3 times in the morning and figure out which you feel the best in. So being able to just know, I'm going to reach in and grab this striped shirt today. I'm going to feel amazing. I'm going to grab this flower, tumbled linen tomorrow. And, it like saves you a lot of time, makes you feel fantastic. So we love being part of that.
Well, and it's not just, normal everyday moms who are our fans and who are going to your shirts as the first thing they want to pull out in their closet that makes them feel strong and empowered. You have some pretty mega fans, Audrey. I can't believe it. What does it feel like to have Oprah calling you and be like, please give me all of your shirts?
We're super flattered. Of course, Oprah doesn't personally call. Wow, that would be amazing. Maybe someday. There's always goals, right? # goals. But her team has actually discovered Frank and Eileen very early on. I feel like it was within our first year or 2, and they've always been really big fans and have been incredibly supportive to us throughout the 10 years, whether it's Oprah wearing it on the cover of her magazine or featuring it within their magazines or, during Christmas and shopping guides and stuff like that. So that's always been obvious. I mean, I'm sure it's no secret when you get a magazine and Oprah's on the cover in your shirt. I mean, people start screaming at the office, so.
Right. Well, and wasn't that, I read somewhere too, that was part of how you created your first online store. Is that true?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. Because they were big supporters from the beginning. And when we launched Frank and Eileen, which was like almost 12 years ago now, I mean, e-commerce didn't really exist. And we were 100% wholesale. So they were calling and saying, we're going to put this gingham. They took like a group of ginghams and the berry, the crinkle that I was telling you about. And they were going to feature it in the magazine. And they said, well, we need by Friday a link of, where we're going to send people to online. And I said, well, we don't have online and we don't sell anyone online.
Right.
And they were like, well, we need something by the date,
something.
Thing comes out, which the magazine was coming out in 5 weeks. So it's like, okay, I'll get back to you. So I call some developers. I'm like, I need to design and launch a site within 5 weeks. And they spent 20 minutes telling me why we couldn't do that and why it wasn't enough time. And I was like, well, now you have 20 minutes less than you had when I got here. So we did it. And we launched the site for $5,000, fully functioning e-commerce site that was integrated with our, with our inventory system and our WNS in the warehouse. And it was like the greatest $5,000 investment I've ever made in my entire life. If only that was replicable. But yeah, we used that site for many years and did a lot of business on it. It was, very simple, but it worked back then. And so basically Oprah and her team forced me to launch our e-commerce business. Thank you, Oprah.
Well, Audrey, I love especially what you've been talking about lately. This is a great example of that. But one of the things that I really admire about both when I saw you speaking at eTail on that panel, and you had another interview with Business of Fashion, and you are very specific about talking about how being this entrepreneur is not glamorous. Like, you almost de-glamorize this role that I think so many people today everybody's an entrepreneur and everybody's going out and doing it. And I really, being an entrepreneur myself, really appreciate that, just that whole narrative that you're bringing out. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's been like, what the last sucker punch to the face was? Like the Oprah getting an e-commerce site up and running and ready to serve every one of Oprah's followers in 5 weeks. What was the last thing that kind of happened to you where you're like, oh, this is awful, this is hard, how am I going to get up and do this again? And how did you get through it?
I think I really like to tell people that being an entrepreneur is really, really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Because I think it's easy, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, it's easy for it to look easy from the outside. And I think there's one of the problems with that is that other people feel like they're doing something wrong and that they're failing. People come to me all the time like, this is so hard. Like, what are we doing wrong? I don't know if I can hang on. I'm like, enjoy the ride. This is it. This is it. Like, it's crazy, And it's funny because when I was at eTail West, when I was speaking, I said, what I like to ask people when they're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, I say, are you sure you really want to be an entrepreneur? Like, what is it that you love to do? And my joke is that if you love waking up every day and getting punched in the face, then
I remember,
career for you. And, it's kind of ironic because, we just finished celebrating our 10-year anniversary with Frank and Eileen, and that was an incredible year. And we launched for our 10-year anniversary, we launched our new brand Grayson, and our 1-year anniversary was March 14th of this year, a couple weeks ago. And we were on top of the world. Frank and Eileen was doing incredibly well. Grayson was the #1 brand in Anthropologie. It had grown unbelievable. I mean, just like numbers that I can't believe we were able to grow in 1 year. And so we were having this incredible celebration on the 12th, 13th, 14th of March, having our 1-year anniversary. And 1 week later, I got the ultimate sucker punch of my entire career, which was that the president of Anthropologie sent out an email and let everybody know that they were canceling all open POs for the rest of the year.
Oh.
So for us, that was, all of a sudden in 1 minute going from being the #1 brand to having our POs canceled for April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and November. So that's how far out we're planned for production. So we're in the process of selling December, January, and February of 2021 right now. So, there's really long lead times in the fashion business. So the consequences of these kind of things are unbelievable. And that moment, I mean, I've never had the wind knocked out of me to the level of receiving that news. It was just, it took quite a minute to be able to breathe again. So, but you recover, you get back up, ultimately as an entrepreneur, like it's just like every day, you serve more problems, different kinds of problems every day. Some problems are good problems and some problems are bad problems, but you're definitely going to have problems every day. This one is obviously unprecedented. And, but you get back up and you have no choice but to first do the damage control and figure out how you're going to navigate that. Obviously we've literally worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the last 3 weekends, trying to unravel, and minimize the damage to our supply chain and our partners. But then you basically immediately get back up and say, all right, well, with any kind of extreme situation comes opportunities that didn't exist before. And it's our job as entrepreneurs to figure out what those opportunities are. And even just in the last 2 weeks, it's been very interesting. Like while on one hand, it's extremely painful, something's come out of it in that I've had a completely different opportunity to reach out to a bunch of female founders that I've never known before, or maybe I met one time, or maybe I didn't know, I'm just a super fan and I buy their product, and been able to reach out and this everybody just wants to band together and help each other. So I feel like I've already built relationships only in the last, 14 days that are going to last a lifetime. We decided to all of a sudden quickly for Frank and Eileen to start featuring, like creating content on our e-commerce and social media and email, and featuring female founders that I love, and asking our community to please understand the importance of supporting small businesses, female founders, especially the ones that are self-financed. And like during this time, not to isolate anyone out, but, if you're choosing to buy a brand, please try not to buy it from a $1 billion company. Please try to buy it from the brand directly or from your local specialty store. So the other thing we started doing immediately, like last week, was starting to identify 3 amazing specialty stores across the US every day, and starting to tell the story of who they are, what city they're in, why they're so special. And we want to just take our entire community and link them all together, right? We don't want it to be Frank and Eileen against the specialty stores or against the department stores. Like, we're all in this together. And if everybody can lean in and help each other, then we'll make it out that much stronger. So it creates some opportunities like that we otherwise would have been going too fast maybe to see, or it would have taken us longer. A lot of these things were already all in the work, but all of a sudden you press pause on a bunch of other stuff and press go on that and just make it happen really fast. And
so Frank and Eileen is now a content provider. You're making apparel. You're coming up with multi-brand retailers from other female founders that you're going to put out into the world. You've got a lot going on. I think you're sufficiently filling those buckets, all of them. It sounds like. Is there anything, Audrey, as you look back at your career, that is still on the bucket list?
In general, I don't think so. I think I love the journey so much that I don't necessarily have some bucket list that I want to accomplish that we haven't. I love our team so much and what we're doing. We love our supply partners, and I think we really enjoy growing the business in an organic way and seeing where it leads us and the opportunities, instead of setting some artificial goal out in the future and working towards it. I think we're much more organic in that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's very apparent from what you've done in the last 3 weeks too, I think, Audrey. So I think you should take some credit for that and really feel some accomplishment. That's really incredible. As we look back on your career, and to kind of close us out here, as you're thinking about it, if you could go back and right now write someone a thank you note for where you are today and someone who's impacted your career, and it could be positive, it could be negative, it could be the coronavirus.
Dear
who yeah, dear COVID-19. Expletive. Who would you write that thank you note to, and what would you say?
You have so many good questions. You know what? If you want to call me in 3 to 5 years and ask me the same question, I might write a letter to COVID-19 because, I think it will create some big changes and some interesting things that we might do very differently. So that would be a good question.
I would love to read that.
Again, in 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
If I had to pick one person now that I would want to write the letter to, there would be several actually, but one of them would probably be Ron Herman. And he's the founder and owner of Ron Herman and what everybody knows in LA as Fred Siegel on Melrose.
Okay.
And, he was in the business for 40 years. And he was one of my first relationships that I built. I came into this industry and into LA, and I didn't know a single person. And I really, really wanted to know whoever was behind Fred Siegel and Ron Herman. And when I moved here, I didn't even know how to say it. I used to say Fred Siegel. Come a long way.
How did you connect with him?
Well, I mean, it's the most famous store in all of Los Angeles, right? So I used to drive over there every day and be like, how could I know someone here? And years went by, and then ultimately, a lot of years went by, and then I had my 4 retail stores, and then I had my brand with the manufacturer that didn't want to work with me, but has now been with me for 15 years. And then I found out he was also doing production there. So I really wanted to meet him, and he refused to meet with me. And I really wanted to sell them my brand, but they wouldn't buy my brand. They wouldn't come and see me for market or anything. So
did you hide out in poplin fabric bolts in the back of the warehouse?
Finally one day I was like, all right. This was before Frank and Eileen. So I was like, that's it. I got to come up with a way. Like I need to meet this man. So I also did not know his email address. So I basically came up with a plan and an email, and my idea was I'm going to come up with an offer he can't refuse. That was my thought. And then I'm going
Okay.
to make up every single email address you could ever imagine. And one is bound to be his, right? Ron at Ron Herman, Ron Herman at Ron Herman, R. Herman at Ron Herman, R. Everything you could ever imagine. I made it all up. So I sent him the email, and lo and behold, he answered me. And first he said, "What's the catch?" And I said, "There is no catch." And he said, "All right, be at my office tomorrow at 11 a.m. So I went to his office at 11 a.m. and we basically agreed to build this relationship where he would give me a lot of information about what was going on in the market and what the customer needed, and I would do all the work. So, he's like, I travel around the world. I've been in this for 40 years, but he was like, honestly, I have no idea how you work with your manufacturer. They make the most beautiful product on earth, but they're incredibly difficult to work with. I don't know how you do it. And I was like, oh, I live there. So I rent office space inside the factory. I brought my couch there, and my dog and I sleep there 3 to 5 nights a week. So that's how I get it done, right? So he says, Audrey, there's no world in which I'm willing to make the kind of sacrifices you do. So I'll help you if you'll help me. I was like, deal. So we started developing product together, and we would, was very integral in helping me design the collections and merchandise them. And, my letter to Ron would be extremely long. But there's so much to thank him for. And, it's like there are a few people that really stand out in my life that have had an unbelievable relationship, but he's someone who, the fashion business is a particular business that attracts particular kind of people. And Ron really stands out way outside of that as someone who has so much integrity and just is just such an incredible person, and his wife and family. And that I'm so incredibly grateful to have been able to have that journey with him. And so, yeah, it would be a very long letter, I think, but
Hey,
we'll both cry.
that's okay. Sometimes those are the best letters. Well, Audrey, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your story. It was such a great conversation, and I really thank you for taking the time, especially with everything going on in the world right now.
It's a highlight. I think everybody needs something like this to be able to, change what we're thinking about and think about the future and some positive things, or even like that question, talk about someone that means so much to me and that's had such an impact in my whole life. Like, I think right now everybody's, a little extra emotional.
Yeah.
And being able to think about some of those things is really nice right now before I get back in and roll my sleeves up and fight this crazy COVID fight right now.
Right. Well, good luck to you, and thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you.
If you could have your own concert and you could choose any 3 bands, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Oh my gosh. You have questions. This happened when we were at the event. You have questions that nobody else has.
Oh God.
This one's hard for me because I'm like not a big music person.
That's okay.
All I listen to is Frozen now,
Oh my God.
I'm a little disconnected from adulthood.
Oh, I know. I know.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
okay.
I don't know. Some of my like all-time favorites are like Tracy Chapman.
Oh yeah.
Which I have like a whole childhood story of my favorite thing in the world. I never went to concerts. I grew up with no money, and I was on my way to her concert, and I had these like overalls on, and I had the tickets in my overalls. I'd never been so happy in my life. And I'd go to the airport to pick up my high school sweetheart, and we were going to Tracy Chapman together because he introduced me to her, and I was just like, not really, like on the CD player. I was so excited, and at the airport somehow I went into the bathroom, and when my overalls flipped over, I lost the tickets. Like I think
No.
Yeah, so I never in my life got to see her in concert.
Oh, no.
So now you're asking me my 40s, and so that immediately comes to my mind because it was something I always wanted to do and I never got to do. So